Thanks for clicking on my video. Before we get started, please click the subscribe button so that you can get more great content such as this one. Thanks. Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm your host, Tony Coleman, and today I'm going to give you a brief look at LDPlayer, which is a phone emulator software. Typically used for playing video games. Some people use it in the beer money community. It can be used for testing, various uses, but it's limited specifically to like phones and tablet uses and less about like core Windows operating system sort of things like other virtual machines. I mentioned the term virtual machine because an emulator is basically a subcategory of virtual machine, so and therefore it is a virtual machine. However, it is more limited because it's specifically emulating a specific type of device and not necessarily universal like a regular virtual machine can be used for. So in this video, I'm specifically mentioning LDPlayer. There are several different emulators out there for Android. Like there's Mimu, there's Nox, BlueStacks is one of the most popular known ones, not necessarily one of the best ones. And there's a whole list of them you can find if you Google it. Just type in Android emulator or phone emulator, and you'll probably see a pretty big list come up. But in this video, I am doing LDPlayer version 4, and hopefully it ends up working out the way we want to. So I've already got it installed. It does sometimes take a while to install depending on what kind of connection you have, but it works pretty well. Some of the other emulators, after you've installed it, it then tries to download the image for the virtual machine, which takes even longer. But LDPlayer is not near as bad as some of them. I usually launch mine from the multiplayer instance instead of the regular LDPlayer 4. Both these icons get installed on your desktop when you install the program. The reason I do this is because I typically run more than one emulator when I do run them. If you just click on the LDPlayer 4, it will just launch one emulator and that's it. So to get more emulators running, you kind of just want to do the LD multiplayer. Now, it will automatically have one already created for you. If you want to create more, you can do so by clicking on New or Clone. Click New LDPlayer if you want a completely fresh, new, straight out of the box emulator. If you want to clone one you've already got set up because you've already got it set up the way you like and you want several of them, you can just hit clone, and then the drop-down box will give you choices based on what emulators you already have. If you do the small disk mode, it reduces disk usage, but it can limit your emulator quite a bit. So depending on what your purpose is, you can control how far they balloon. I want to say the small disk mode tries to limit it somewhere around the 3 GB range, but don't quote me on that. But anyway, before we launch it, I will show you some of the settings. Coming in here, it starts out by default as tablet mode. I usually switch mine to mobile mode, and as you can see, there's different resolution options for those. And then I usually set mine as 720 by 1280. I tend to find that when I'm utilizing the emulators, they tend to work better if it's got a little higher resolution than the minimum. They do have the ultra wide options, so if you were actually trying to play games or some other purpose and needed a wider screen, maybe you wanted to utilize your entire monitor screen, you can. Or you can even customize your own sizes here. But I usually go with the default mobile mode, and I choose that. Here for CPU, sometimes you'll see it say core, sometimes CPUs, depending on the emulator you choose. It all means the same thing. Basically, your computer has only so many cores in the processor. Sometimes your processor may have hyperthreading, and if it does, those will act like their entire cores. So you might actually only have 4 cores but 8 threads, and in those cases you could allot up to 8. The computer I'm on only has 4 cores total, so that's why there's only 4 cores available here. RAM, You can set your own RAM. You can either take a predefined amount or you can customize, or actually, no, with LDPlayer, the most they let you go up to is 8 gig. Some of the other ones will let you actually customize. Usually 4 gigabyte is more than enough for the majority of apps that you're going to use. But if you are gaming, some of your games you might actually want to do more. It's up to you. For managing your disk, automatically expand when there is not enough space. What that means is you're not limiting your emulator to a set size on the hard drive, so it will keep growing as long as there's spare space to give as needed. If you manually manage the disk space, then you basically are telling it when it can grow and when it can't. I recommend just leaving it as automatically unless you have limitations on the hard drive that you've got available for it. So then under the model category, here you can kind of randomize your IMEI so that you can trick apps into thinking that it is actually a phone and has a unique IMEI. You can designate any name in here for manufacturer if you want, but I recommend just leaving the defaults. You can even choose different models of devices that they have already pre-existing in here. That way, if there is a compatibility issue for some reason, it kind of matches up. The number is basically if you want to put like a phone number in there, it'll just populate. So, don't know what apps actually look for it, but it might help, it might not. Don't know. Don't care. Game settings. This is more for gaming. You can do your frame rates. By default, it's 60, but if you have like a monitor that can handle much better frame rates, or even video cards that can push it, this is an option to improve things. Most of this stuff is only going to be if you're playing specific video games that demand more performance, but as you can see, they've got the settings in here that you can adjust as needed. Audio, if you have a microphone or speaker settings set up for it, you can. In my case, it's not detecting anything for it, not giving me the choice. Your network, you can actually disconnect your emulator from the network so that it doesn't have internet access. By default, it's going to use whatever the network connection is on your PC or laptop. And you can enable or disable bridging. Shortcuts, of course, it's got keystrokes that you can use for interacting with the emulator without having to use a mouse. That's handy if you're playing video games quite a bit or have certain features that you want to do, like if you want to shake the phone. There's options within Android for what shaking the phone actually does. So different options here. Very helpful, especially if you're wanting to record something that's on the screen. You can do that. Yes, it does have macro software built into it, so you could possibly automate some stuff. Other settings, something I usually change is this right here. I do not want my screen auto-rotating, because if I'm playing a game or something and an ad comes up, I don't want it to keep changing the screen, because what it'll do is it'll actually take the entire emulator and it'll turn it sideways, and that doesn't always work well with certain monitors. It just messes with things sometimes. So you end up having a sideways picture that you have to click an X on. So it's just annoying. But they've got the other features like ADB debugging, some exit options like do you want a pop-up prompt confirming you want to get out of it, stuff like that. But all this stuff is optional. I usually just change a few of the settings and then I hit save settings. So from there, the other thing I go into is my optimization. Some people don't need all their emulators running at full performance, so they can reduce some of the system requirements by reducing the frames per second. I don't. I've noticed that by reducing that, a lot of the emulators become very laggy and non-responsive. So I tend to recommend leaving the 60 frames per second. You can disable the sound to use less CPU. If you've got emulators that don't need audio, because not all games do you need to hear, and not all apps that you're running need have audio to it. There's no reason for it to be trying to do audio output. You can just disable the sound on them, and it will disable all of the instances. the ultimate and multi-open mode, use less graphics memory and RAM. Basically, it tries to cut down on the hardware acceleration, and so we'll use less resources. This is more for people who are trying to run too many emulators for what their hardware can handle, so they'll try to reduce the needs for each of those, but there is a performance hit when you do that, so be very careful. Virtual disk mode, there's high speed and then there's stable. Stable you only want to use if you have a solid state hard drive, and that's because it will be writing to the hard drive files a little bit quicker and more often. So it makes the virtual machine or the emulator have less problems long term, or if the power was cut out, but it can do a little bit more wear on your hard drive, in my opinion. It says when creating a new LD player, default mode is small disk. You can set that by default if you want. I don't, because I don't always want mine small disk. Automatic arrangement settings, you can do grid, diagonal, however you want it. If you have multiples open, you can have however many in a row. So if you had like 8, this would make 2 rows of 4. Your batch operation parameters for starting interval. This means if you had like say 10 emulators you wanted to start up at once, you don't always want all 10 starting up at the same time, because your system may have problems with all the IOs or input outputs requests for your hard drive, especially if you got an older hard drive that is traditional, not a solid state drive, because the disks will have limited throughput, and if you have too many going at once, all of them will stall and take longer to build up, and then you'll start getting a lot of errors for Android saying that's not responsive or what have you. So I recommend, if you've got several emulators, to change that setting to something a little more manageable, like 20-40 seconds between each one starting up. That way you give the emulator time to fully start up before it starts the next one. As far as number of new clone batches, you can actually do en masse instead of having to click one at a time. By default, they have it listed as 5. You can change it to 10. You can do it to 100 if you wanted, but I would recommend just whatever the default is, unless you actually have a plan for a larger number. I like to check this box, remember all window positions, because if I resize an emulator and put it in a specific spot on my screen, the next time I launch it up, I usually want it in the same spot, same size, because it's just how I want it configured. And so by doing that, every time I close the emulators, it'll remember the size and where it was located. And then you don't have to hit save settings here. It automatically saves when you tick the boxes. Just hit the X. And now we get to actually start up an emulator. So just hit start. As you can see, it's loading in the vertical format because I set it to the phone mode instead of tablet. Tablet mode will basically be horizontal. And since there's only one emulator going on this laptop, it loads up pretty decently fast. Now, if you have several going, this could be delayed more. I've also found that if your internet is really, really slow, sometimes that can be problematic for starting up too. Here in a second, we'll probably see a couple more icons going because it's the free version of LDPlayer. And the free version of LDPlayer, they basically have it ad supported or game supported. You can purchase a monthly or yearly plan for it, and it takes away a lot of that and doesn't try to check in and get those updates. But I think most people are just going to go with the free version. So it just downloaded the Ants Underground game. You can actually just move it if you really wanted, or put it into a different group somewhere, but I usually move it to get it out of the way. Here's your system apps that's already got on it. So this version, which on LDPlayer 4076 has Chrome. Some of the older versions do not have Chrome on it, so you'd have to download. There is no account set up yet, so getting into Play Store, it's going to ask me to put in a username and password. Just like setting up a phone. This part sometimes can take a bit, and sometimes I've seen this even close out of the Play Store setup if it takes too long, because sometimes there's updates trying to run in the back to update the Play Store so that it works better. Don't be surprised if it happens, but here, just like setting up a phone, you put in your email or your phone number for the Google account. So I will go ahead and pause this for a moment so I can get that set up. All right, so I've got the email logged in. It's one of my disposable email addresses that I made for this video. So here we're in the Play Store. You can do all your settings. I usually like going in dark mode. Scrolling down. And we are going to it hasn't updated yet, so general, and I want to change it over any because I want my updates to automatically update. And now here we are where we can download any app that's in the Play Store. Now some apps won't run properly in an emulator, some will. Some will detect you're in an emulator and tell you that tough luck, can't use it. But a lot of them work pretty well. Now, for those who are doing beer money stuff, be very careful because a lot of the beer money apps will detect an emulator. Not all of them do, but some of them will, and if they find out, a lot of those apps will ban you. So I usually try to install either Kiwi or Brave into the browser's apps, just because sometimes Chrome doesn't like it too well. Lately, I've had more issues with them not wanting to install non-Play Store applications. So I found Firefox works pretty good. And then sometimes you also just have to use the file manager app that's built into LDPlayer to open certain apps. But here I will give an example of an app that you could try running. In this case, we will try Cache Magnet, since I really don't care about that app. Alright, let me move this so that I can log in. Took it off the screen because you don't need to know the password to get in there. And we will go to downloads. What I want to do. Alright, so logged in Cache Magnet. I'm on the downloads page. App for Android. Hit download. It'll come up as potentially risky because it's not in the Play Store. Just hit OK. May take a moment to download. Looks like it's going pretty quick. All right, so here, if I just click on this, good possibility that Chrome won't be happy with it. Something tried updating there. It refreshed the page for some reason. Cancel, don't need to re-download it. Yeah, the browser itself's having issues at the moment, probably because there is an update or something being pushed through. However, we'll minimize this if it'll let me. Go ahead and close it. File manager. Download. Cache magnet. Install. And now it's installing the cache magnet app, the current official one. It's done. Just hit open. And yes, for cache magnet, you'll probably want to set yours to 4 cores and 4 gig of RAM just because it tends to like additional resources. I do sometimes have issues with it logging in or trying to detect as a VPN when in an emulator, but that's all part of it. So let me move it off the screen because you don't need to see my login. Waiting for it to log in here. Then I'll bring it back onto the screen. Alright, so there it is. It's wanting to do the accessibility. So just click on that. Settings. On magnet accessibility service, turn it on. See, that's one of the ads they've been downloading. So anyway, minimize that. So now that's on. Overlay is off. So turn that on. And I usually put 50% so I can see what's going on behind it. And then hit start. Now, sometimes you'll get server errors. Sometimes it will say that you're behind a VPN. If that's the case, restart your emulator and try again. But right now, it's now running. It's going to try downloading the cache magnet apps. As you can see, it's got other things running there. That's what the overlay is good for, having 50%, because you can see what's kind of going on behind this page. But that's all there is. I will end up deleting this emulator because I won't run this on this computer across this network. But I wanted to show you that you can set up apps. You can run it. Some things run better than others, but it still follows the same rules. Like with cache magnet, you can only have 4 per IP address. I will be changing some of my settings here, but I just wanted to show you that it does work. That's how simple it is to use these emulators. If you wanted to use some of the other tools, they've got a bunch of options on the side here. Like that is to rotate your screen. That's your location for virtual GPS. That's to share a folder between the emulator and your PC. That's to do the shake command on a phone if you have something set up for it. Synchronize video recorder, so you could actually record something on this device here as if it was a phone recording, and then you could share that elsewhere if you wanted. You could do screenshots. You can install APKs just by clicking on that. This has the multi-LDPlayer, just pulls this screen up. Then the next is the operation recorder. That's basically the built-in macro. It works pretty well. Won't show you how to use it. You can figure that out or Google it. Your full screen mode basically just maximizes it on the screen, but when it's in this mode, the portrait mode, it doesn't work out so well, or the vertical setup. Your volume up and down, because some apps require you to have volume on, and Then you have your keyboard mappings. You can turn all that on, and then that way certain keys do certain things. You got your settings, which is what we've already set. And then, of course, your typical toggle buttons for your apps. So that's pretty much all you need to do. Yes, they do have gamepads that are supported for games if you're playing games. So I can turn that off because I'm not really trying to earn with it. You can pretty much install anything and use it. It's not hard to do. There's a small learning curve to some of it if you're trying to get more advanced with it, but LDPlayer works pretty well. You'll find that most of the other emulator apps are pretty close to the same because they're all based off of VirtualBox anyway. So each of the companies have their own tweaks, their own graphical interface changes. Some of them work better, some are more stable than others. Some offer newer versions of Android, like I will show you the Android version here. Some of them have an option for like Android 9. I believe this is Android 7. Yeah, it's Android 7.1.2. Some are 32-bit, some give you the choice of 64-bit. Not all of them have all these options. Usually the Android 9s are beta versions, and from my experience, the Android 9s aren't as stable or have a lot of issues that the Android 7s don't. So they've got a lot of work to do to get caught up with modern times, as there are a lot of apps that are now requiring Android 8 above. So that's something else you might want to keep in mind if you're going to be using these apps. And I wouldn't put too much stock in them other than just using it for some basic functionality. So, got any questions? Feel free to put them down in the comment section down below. I'll answer some of them depending on what the question is. When it comes to emulators, I try not to answer too many questions, especially if they break TOSs, but feel free to put them down there anyway. Share my video, like it, hit that bell button so that you can get notifications when I post new content. And then until next time, that's all I got. Have a good one.